The sky above Zelani Prime turned the color of bruised glass when the warning chimes began to sing. Rhea Ortiz felt the song through the soles of her boots before she heard it with her ears. The crystal avenues of Siloran Spire carried sound like water carries light. Each note fluttered along the streets and through the living towers, climbing the air on shimmering chords. The Zelani called it a civil tone. Humans called it an alarm. Rhea straightened from the bench where she'd been elbow-deep in a humming console. Her hands were black with carbon grease. It stained the pale scars that ran like pale rivers over her knuckles. She wiped them on her work pants and looked up. Far overhead, the floating city's roots, long ribs of faceted crystal, glowed a soft blue as anti-gravity anchors shifted power. Gardens hung under every terrace, spilling silver vines and pale flowers that opened and closed with the tone. Zelani citizens flowed along the walkways like water through coral. Their skin was a living display, bands of sapphire and white flickering in patterns that meant words: comfort, calm, order. "Do you hear it?" asked Thalen, her friend and the Spire's young liaison. He stood framed by a window of slow-moving rain. The shower was intentional. The Zelani cooled their towers by letting water drift, bead, and sing across the crystal ribs. Thalen's cheeks glowed with a worried murmur of light. "Civil tone 14, that is." "Distress on a monitored channel," Rhea said. "I know." She knew the catalog by heart. She learned the Spire like she once learned the Undercity of Cydonia Station on Mars. One breaker panel at a time, one ship's guard handhold at a time. "Route it to comms 3. Thalen's skin cooled from worried violet to firm blue. He swiped his palm across the air. The window thickened into a dense, prismatic lens. Symbols flickered. To Rhea, Zelani's script looked like light trapped in ice. To Thalen, it read like poetry. He tilted his head, listening. "Message fragment. Origin outer ring beacon K40, the Vesper Gate chain. That is far." His voice softened. "My sibling Ara serves there with the archival fleet." Rhea felt the small hitch in his tone. She didn't comment. She just crossed the workshop, ducked under a tide of hanging tools, and jogged into comms 3, her kingdom of cobbled systems and alien elegance. The room was all smooth curves. Zelani consoles responded to touch and music. They used harmonic couplers, not wires. They sang to their machines. Rhea's corner broke the symmetry, a human rack with cooling fans and angry little status lights. She had stripped it from a retired ore tug and smuggled it up the spire piece by piece, like a contraband heart. "Patch it," she said. Thalen stood at the threshold, skin light pulsing with quick, tight beads. Worry, approval, worry again. He hummed a short phrase. The room's crystal spine deepened in tone. A tiny hiss of static answered, faint as a sigh. "Let me," Rhea said. She reached under the Zelani console, found the throat of a singing conduit, and pinched it quiet with her palm. The tone cut to a whisper. Her other hand flicked a switch on the human rack. Old Fan's word, an ugly sound in such a beautiful room. She opened a channel the Zelani didn't know existed here, a simple, stupid human thing that spoke in volt and ground instead of in light and song. The whisper sharpened. The static became a needle, then through the hiss. "Any Terran vessels, request, kinetic response, shield drain, energy weapons worsen, repeat, do not engage with energy." Rhea's stomach clenched. The voice did not belong to a Zelani. It carried the flat, clipped vowels of someone born somewhere between orbitals. Terran Defense Corps. Thalen stepped closer now, drawn like a tide toward a moon. "Is that?" "Human," Rhea said, "and begging for rocks and railguns." On the window, a map bloomed, a stylized sector web overlaid with red pulses. The Vesper Gate links glowed like a string of beads. One bead blinked red, bright, and frantic. Another voice cut through, this one Zelani, raw with fear in a way she had never heard a Zelani speak. "Beacon K40 is at 5% shield reserve. We have refugees aboard. Control nodes unknown. We cannot see the enemy. They drink our power. Request immediate anyone, please." The alarm song climbed a step. Rhea's scars itched. She kept her voice steady with effort. "We've seen this." Thalen turned to her, skin patterning dark like stormlight underwater. "You knew of this threat? The histories." "Not history," Rhea said. "Experience." She ticked the events off with grease-marked fingers. "An enemy that eats energy, beautiful ships that fight with light and are undressed by the first dark mouth that tastes it. Then somebody fires a rock at 10 kilometers a second and the dark mouth learns about Newton." Thalen's throat band brightened in a question mark. The Zelani had no eyebrows. They wore curiosity as a flare of soft white. You are certain. No, Rhea said, but I've heard a voice say kinetic response before. She swallowed the taste that came with those words, ozone, smoke, and the iron smell of someone else's blood. During the Scab Belt mutiny, an energy eater hacked our drone line. If it absorbs light, you stop using light. You throw things, stab things, rip out pieces, and make them hit each other. You make the math hurt. A new voice entered the room, not through speakers, but through air. Calm as a flute, old as a rulebook. Your similes are charming, Terran Ortiz, it said. Your unauthorized equipment is not. Rhea didn't need to turn to know who had spoken. Archon Ilian Seer of the Preservation Council wore rulebook air like a second skin. He stepped into Comms 3 without looking at a single door. His personal field bent doors around him. 2 security drones followed, smooth eggs of white ceramic with lenses like cold eyes. His skin displayed a clean pattern, lawful silver on calm blue. His voice did not rise to reach their ears. The room reached closer to catch it. This is a monitored distress. Your improvisation will stop now. Rhea flicked her gaze at Thalen. Thalen's skin flashed in quick bands that meant apology, then tried to settle into counselor-safe neutrality. Archon, he said, lowering his head. We were routing a call to the embassy. The Outer Ring requests Terran assistance. The Outer Ring requests rashness. Ilian smiled without light in it. And the embassy will receive what the council chooses to send. Our laws do not permit unlicensed weapons in core space. Kinetic strikes reduce matter to fragments. Fragments collide. Collisions become tragedies. We're not talking about a factory accident, Rhea said. We're talking about a gate full of refugees and something that drinks your light. Then we will dim, Ilian said. We will yield ground until our scholars can name the thirst. We will retreat without making new storms. Rhea's jaw tightened. If you retreat long enough, you arrive at your own heart. The Archon's eyes slid to the human rack, to the ugly fan noise, to the cable that ran like a black river across the pristine floor. This is not your world, he said. She could have said, someone invited us. She could have said, someone begged. Instead, she said nothing and kept her hands on the board. Behind Ilian, one drone unfolded a lattice of white steel that hummed in a frequency her teeth disliked. The other drone blossomed a flower of light and threw it over her human rack. The fans whined down. Status lights went dark. The thread of the distress call snapped. Thalen flinched like someone had slapped him. Rhea froze, then made herself swallow the heat that rose in her throat. The Council, Ilian said gently, has determined that Terran kinetic intervention creates more danger than it removes. Your weapons are obscene intrusions in a world designed for harmony. We will evacuate the Vesper link chains that can be evacuated. We will mourn what we must, but we will not invite debris storms into our skis. Rhea heard a child laugh out in the spire, high and clear as a bell. It made the Archon's words feel like ice. Thalen found his voice. It came out small. Archon, Ara is there. Ilian's skin dimmed half a tone, sympathy measured and safe. We carry all lives equally, Thalen of the Spire. That is why we obey procedure. Rhea felt the old tremor tap her wrist just once. She pressed her hands flat to quiet it. Give me a monitored path, she said. Let me notify the Terran base through your own relay. Write the message. Vet every word. We'll ask for a tug. A tug can pull the station clear. No strikes. Terran tugs are engines married to railguns, Ilian said. Every tool you bring hides a hammer. His eyes gentle touched Thalen and then avoided him. The Council has spoken. The civil tone will end soon. The city must not feel fear. He turned. Doors arranged themselves for his path. The drones folded into quiet eggs again and glided after him. The hum of the crystal spine swelled. The alarm shimmered down a step. Outside the window, rain sang against sunlit stone. It looked like peace. Thalen stood very still. His skin shifted through a dozen meanings too fast for Rhea to read. Sorrow, anger, appeal, shame, love. He exhaled. Zelani did not cry the way humans did. Their grief lived as pattern and harmony, tones that trembled, lights that blurred. Thalen's tones trembled now. I can put you in the Council's petition chain, he said quietly. 72 minutes, perhaps less. 72 minutes is a lifetime at a failing gate, Rhea said, or the end of one. She turned back to the dead human rack. She knelt and ran her fingers under it until she found the latch she'd hidden from herself, because if she hid it from herself, she knew she'd also hide it from anyone watching her hands. She popped the latch. A thin drawer slid out. Inside lay a spool of cable, a knuckle of hardened ceramic with a metal mouth, two dull gray slugs the size of her thumb, and an ugly little smile of magnets glued into a ring. Thalen stared, his skin paled a maple sugar color that meant horror. Rhea. "It's a whisper gun," she said softly. "From a lifeboat. Coil the slugs slow enough you don't tear holes in anything, you just throw a message where light can't go." "Illegal," Thalen said. He reached out and did not touch it. Zelani did not touch without invitation. He pulled his hand back as if it had brushed a flame. "Archon Ilian will." "Be angry," Rhea said. "He can get in line, help me." Thalen looked at the window, where rain blurred a garden and children chased each other between blue trees. He looked at the dead map with its single blinking bead. He looked at Rhea's face. The set jaw, the old scars, the eyes that had seen duct tape hold pressure where it had no right to hold and had watched men die anyway. He reached for the cable. His hands shook. He was Zelani. He was not built for defiance, but his sibling was at K-40. "What do I do?" he asked. Rhea's shoulders eased half a hair. She pressed the ceramic mouthpiece against a maintenance port at the base of the crystal spine. The port was meant for service drones, little spider machines that polished and tuned the spire's harmonics. She opened it 100 times. Never for this. "Hold the cable. When I say hum a G in their scale and keep it dead steady. I'm going to piggyback on a housekeeping pulse. The coil will push the slug along the spine and into the uplink ring. The ring will spit it into a service duct. From there it rides the old meteor shield rails to the outer antenna. Then," she set the first dull slug in the whisper gun's mouth and clicked the magnet ring into place. "It leaves this city as a pebble. If the pebble kisses the right plate on the outer ring, the plate will sing in a way our Terran base at Selkhatch can hear in their bones." Thalen's skin flickered in fear and wonder. "You will throw a letter." "Exactly," Rhea said, "and Ilya can argue with the wind about who delivered it." She breathed once, twice. The tremor in her wrist had gone. She found the hum of the spire, sang a human note that matched it, then dropped her pitch a fraction. A gap opened like a parted curtain. "Gee," she said. Thalen's throat glowed. He sang a note as pure as a string of ice. The whisper coil thumped. The cable shivered like a living thing. Rhea felt the slug leap away from human gravity and choose the spire's path instead. On her dead human board, a single LED flickered and held. "Come on," she whispered. The coil thumped again. The second slug waited between her fingers. She lifted it and paused when the room's light bent. Not dimmed, bent, as if something massive had passed between the sun and the spire and decided to stay there. A soft, almost polite pressure squeezed Rhea's eardrums. The rain on the window stopped mid-fall and hung like beads on strings. Thalen's song faltered. The spire sang back, sharp with distress. The civil tone tried to stay calm and could not. Rhea's chest tightened. She turned toward the window. Beyond the blue gardens, beyond the terraces and the river of bird-like gliders, beyond the spires that crowned the city like diadems, the sky bruised a deeper color still. A shadow unclenched itself from the clouds. It had no edges. It drank them. The floating city's far anchors flashed and died as if someone had pinched their throats. One of the minor towers tilted 3 degrees and held. The floor under Rhea's boots slid half a finger in the wrong direction. "Rhea," Thalen whispered. His skin had gone to a silent, terrified white. "The anchors." Another polite pressure pressed her ears. Something spoke without sound and the room's lights went out. The spire's song dropped from harmony to a single raw string scraped by a dull knife. Rhea snatched the second slug like it was a life. The city groaned as if an old glacier had begun to move. "Hold the note," she told Thalen and slammed the slug into the coil. The whisper gun kicked. The cable bucked like a startled snake. Somewhere far above, something popped like a distant knuckle cracking. The LED on the dead board went from flicker to fierce, steady red. And out beyond the rain-streaked window, where the sky had become a bruise, the floating city's central heart, the ancient crystal that anchored every other anchor, cracked straight through with a sound that made the world flinch. The spire began to fall. The floating city had never known weight until that moment. When the heart crystal cracked, the hum of the spire faltered. A sound like shattering glass rolled through the avenues. Bridges buckled, terraces swayed. Hanging gardens tore free, spilling silver vines into the void. Thousands of Zelani voices, normally melodic, composed, rose in a fractured storm of panic. Rhea's boots slid across the crystal floor. Her whisper coil tore free from the maintenance port and whipped against her leg like a live serpent before going slack. The lead on her dead human rack still burned red. That meant the message had launched. Somewhere the pebble flew, but that pebble was light years from saving the city. Thalen fell to his knees, skin flashing chaotic white, violet, and pale green, fear, despair, helplessness all layered. He gripped the floor with trembling hands. "It is unmaking the song," he gasped. "The city cannot hold without harmony." "Up," Rhea barked. She yanked him by the arm. The tremor in her own wrist was back, a hard buzz. She forced it down with sheer will. "You want to save your sibling? Then don't die here in the first 5 minutes." Another crystal rib broke with a thunderous crack. The floor tilted 5 degrees. The spire began to spin in slow, awful majesty. Emergency tones ignited across the chamber. Zelani sirens were not screams of metal but piercing harmonic chords that stabbed into bone. Doors unfolded themselves into escape routes. The security drones that had shadowed Archon Ilion earlier now drifted back in, their white shells glowing. One extended a calming light across the chamber. "Remain in harmony. Evacuation in process." "Evacuation where?" Rhea muttered. She shoved a shoulder under Thalen's weight and pushed him toward the exit. Beyond the room, the once beautiful avenue now groaned under stress. Zelani citizens poured out of crystal towers in waves, their skins lit with frenzied colors. Harmony had shattered. The spire lurched again. A whole section of terrace broke free and tumbled into the mists below. People screamed in lights and tones. The city, the jewel of a civilization that had not known war for 3 millennia, was dying like a candle drowned in its own wax. Rhea caught sight of Archon Ilion at the far end of the hall. He was surrounded by guards, his skin still calm silver blue, his voice amplified in soft but commanding chords. "Follow procedure. Anchor vessels will engage. Trust the council." Anchor vessels? Rhea's jaw clenched. She knew those ships. Massive, elegant craft designed to hold cities steady in storms, not face down whatever monster had just torn a city heart in two. And then she saw it. Through the wide crystal wall behind the Archon, a shadow moved. It wasn't shaped. It wasn't even wrong in a way her brain could make sense of. It just erased whatever it touched. Towers beyond the spire winked out, whole districts vanishing as though someone had erased them with the edge of a charcoal smudge. The void swarm. It wasn't coming, it was here. "Move," Rhea shoved Thalen ahead. A crystal arch groaned above them. A shard the size of a bus tore free, shearing past her shoulder. She felt the rush of displaced air, sharp as a knife. It smashed into the floor behind them, fracturing into 1,000 glittering knives. Thalen stumbled but kept moving. His skin flashed a frantic yellow, the Zelani word for wear. "Dock tier," Rhea snapped. "Shuttles, if we get high enough, we might jump a ride off this death trap." They fought through a press of bodies in the main corridor. Zelani moved like schools of fish, their panic carried in bursts of color and tones. The air smelled of sharp ozone from ruptured harmonic conduits. Rhea shoved and elbowed, earning shocked flashes from citizens not used to physicality. But the press opened. Even in panic, they parted around the scarred human who moved with the certainty of survival. A thunder rolled through the spire. The lights flickered. Then for a heartbeat, everything froze, people, walls, the very air. Rhea realized with horror it wasn't stillness, it was pressure. Something was drinking the city's energy, pulling it into itself. "Don't stop," she screamed. She dragged Thalen through the invisible glue. Step by step, their boots tore free of the sticky pull. The corridor bent, fractured, then opened onto a wide dock tier. The dock had once been a marvel, dozens of crystal platforms where Zelani skimmers hummed in elegant arcs, suspended by harmonic anchors. Now half the skimmers dangled like broken toys, their anchors dim. Sparks fell like starlight. The far wall glowed with cracks, and in the gaps between towers, Rhea glimpsed the shadow again, closer, hungrier. Thalen faltered, starring, his skin flared pale in grief. "They consume song," he whispered. "No," Rhea said, "they consume everything." A group of Zelani guards sprinted past, their armor glowing with weak patterns. One carried a harmonic staff. They leveled it at the shadow and fired. A perfect chord lashed out, a spear of energy bright enough to blind. The shadow rippled and grew. The guards froze. One dropped his staff, his skin flickering in utter despair. Rhea grabbed it. The weapon hummed in her hand like a harp string pulled taut. She didn't know Zelani chords, but she knew power sources. She ripped the coupling free. The staff screamed as the crystal inside bled raw energy. Sparks lit her fingers. She shoved the crystal core into her tool belt. Rhea, Thalen gasped, horrified. That's council property. Good, she snapped. Council property just got eaten. A skimmer on the near pad still glowed faintly. Its anchor hadn't failed. Rhea pulled Thalen toward it. She slammed her palm against the hatch. Nothing. She cursed and tore the cover off a service panel, jammed the crystal into the socket, and bridged 2 contacts with her grease-stained hand. The hatch hissed open. Inside, the skimmer smelled of rain and crystal resin. Panels pulsed faintly. Rhea shoved Thalen in and dove after him. She slammed the hatch shut just as another thunder shook the dock. The skimmer's controls sang in Zelani harmonics. Thalen's hands hovered, trembling. I cannot. Yes, you can, Rhea snapped. Sing, Thalen, keep it steady, I'll handle the push. He swallowed, his throat glowed. He sang a trembling note. The skimmer's anchors stirred, weak but alive. Rhea yanked a lever, forced the skimmer's belly jets open. The vessel lurched. The dock collapsed behind them. Half a dozen Zelani still waiting screamed as the platform folded into void. The skimmer surged upward, engines howling in protest. Rhea pressed her back to the seat and clenched her jaw as the city's ruins fell away beneath them. But the shadow rose with them. It followed like hunger given shape, erasing towers, bridges, and gardens in silence. Rhea slammed the throttle forward. The skimmer groaned. Thalen's voice broke in panic. The engines flickered. The whisper coil's LED still glowed on her belt. The pebble had flown. The message was out, but no help could come in time to save Zelani Prime. And as the skimmer burst through the last cloud layer, Rhea saw the truth that froze her blood. The shadow wasn't one thing, it was many. A swarm. Dozens of shapes writhed above the city, blotting out the sun. Each one moved with liquid silence, pulling light into its skin and leaving nothing. The void swarm hadn't come to Zelani Prime. It had always been here. And the city had been singing its death lullaby for centuries without knowing. The skimmer's engines whined as they clawed through the last layers of the atmosphere. Zelani Prime shrank below, its crystal towers collapsing like glass dominoes as the void swarm poured across the sky. Rhea braced herself against the shaking hull, gripping the stolen crystal core she had jammed into the control panel. The core was overloading, filling the cabin with the smell of hot resin. Thalen, hold that note steady, she barked. His throat glowed faint blue as he sang, voice ragged with fear. The skimmer's harmonic systems caught the tone, kept the gravitic anchor from failing. Sweat slicked his pale skin, his colors flashing in frantic bursts of yellow-white panic. Then the air turned heavy. A shadow surged past them, closer than a breath. The skimmer bucked like a kicked animal. Panels flickered. The glass canopy darkened as if touched by ink. The swarm was following. Rhea cursed, "It wants us." "It wants everything," Thalen gasped. The void mass curved, shifting like liquid night, reaching tendrils of darkness that bent light around them. It didn't attack with weapons. It didn't need to. Systems failed by being near it. Energy drained away, sound dampened, and even thought seemed to stagger. The skimmer's lights winked out. "Sing louder," Rhea shouted. "Drown it out." Thalen screamed a note that made the canopy shiver. For a heartbeat, the ship's anchors flickered back, but the shadow kept pressing closer. And then out of the void, light, human light, cut through. A kinetic slug the size of a car ripped across the swarm's flank. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't wrapped in harmonics or quantum disruption. It was a chunk of metal thrown at 20 kilometers a second. The void form rippled like water struck by a hammer. A gap tore open in its skin of darkness. For the first time, the swarm recoiled. The slug had come from above. Rhea craned her neck. Her chest went cold and hot at once. Breaking out of hyperspace above the planet's exosphere came a shape that looked crude compared to the elegant alien vessels. Angles of gray steel, blocky thruster arrays, armor scarred from old wars. The UES Defiant, humanity's first warship beyond the solar frontier. "By all the harmonies," Thalen whispered, his skin flickered disbelief. "What is that?" Rhea smiled with her teeth bared. "That's the cavalry." The Defiant opened fire again. 6 railguns spat glowing streaks of tungsten into the swarm. Each slug carved holes in the void creatures, leaving trails of nothingness where the swarm had been. Nuclear missiles followed, fat, blunt-nosed things humanity had built to crack bunkers on Mars. In the vacuum of orbit, they bloomed like miniature suns. The swarm convulsed, a dozen smaller void forms shredded under the shockwaves. For the first time, the predators of light met something they couldn't drink: matter and fire. The Defiant's transmission crackled over the skimmer's failing comms. A voice, clipped and commanding, filled the cabin. "This is Commander Lisa Hayes of the Earth Defense Force. Zelani vessels fall back to safe distance. Will take point." Thalen's throat band pulsed in shock. "She speaks for your entire world." "She speaks for the ones who showed up," Rhea said, her eyes burned. "And that's enough." The skimmer lurched again, as the swarm turned its attention from the dying city below to the ugly human ship above. Hundreds of void forms twisted in unison, flowing like ink toward the Defiant. They moved without thrusters, without engines, as though they bent space around themselves. The alien fleet that had been stationed in system tried to rally, their elegant ships forming geometric formations. Plasma cannons and quantum disruptors lit the dark, but the void absorbed it all. The Zelani ships began to die. One after another, their shields collapsed, their hulls cracked, and whole crews vanished into silence. The Defiant didn't stop. Railguns fired again. More slugs tore through the void swarm. Another nuclear missile spread fire across the night. For each void destroyed, 2 more surged forward, but the humans didn't falter. "Come on," Rhea muttered under her breath. "Show them how we fight." The swarm struck back. Dark beams lanced from its largest entities, not like energy but like absence, cuts in the fabric of reality. They struck the Defiant's hull. Entire sections of armor vanished as if erased. Warning beacons lit across the human ship's flanks. On the bridge of the Defiant, Commander Hayes stood with her hands braced on the railing. Her crew moved with grim precision. "Damage report," she snapped. "Port armor gone on Deck 6, shouted Chief Engineer Bobby Carter. "Life support failing on lower barracks." "Evacuate the section, reroute power," Hayes barked. Tactical Officer Pete Jackson's voice was grim. "We've lost 3 guns, ammo at 60%, missiles at half." "We're not dying here," Hayes said, her eyes locked on the swarm blotting out the stars. "Target their largest formation, prepare a full spread." "Aye, Commander," Pete said. The humans fired again. Slugs tore holes, missiles cracked open more void shapes. The swarm writhed, feeding on its own dead, growing stronger. Rhea's skimmer bucked as shockwaves from the battle tore through the upper atmosphere. Thalen clutched the canopy frame. His skin flickered awe and horror in equal measure. They fight, knowing they cannot win. Rhea's voice was low, steady. "No, Thalen, they fight because someone asked them to." The swarm regrouped. Hundreds of void entities shifted together, their movements synchronized, as if one mind directed them. The control signal pulsed through the black, invisible to most sensors, but not to human eyes watching the pattern. On the Defiant, Science Officer Karen Bell leaned over her console. "Commander, I think I see it. Their movement isn't random. There's a signal, a control node." "Where?" Hayes demanded. Karen's fingers flew. "There, empty space, 50,000 kilometers ahead. No visible mass, but something's there." "Pete," Hayes snapped. "Blind shot, full-yield nuke." "Aye," Pete set the coordinates, hands shaking. "Firing." A single missile streaked into the void, dumb and ugly, its guidance primitive. It detonated in empty space. The blast peeled away the mask. For one breathless second, a massive void entity flickered into view, 10 times the size of the scouts, its body pulsing with the rhythm of command. The explosion tore it apart. The swarm shuddered. Smaller forms drifted aimlessly, losing coherence. Dozens collided, unraveling in bursts of nothingness. The aliens watching from their failing ships gasped. Ambassador Keithar's skin flared with stunned realization aboard the flagship. The humans found its heart. But the victory was brief. From beyond the system edge, new rifts opened. The true fleet arrived. 300 massive void entities, each the size of a city, poured into real space. Behind them flowed thousands of smaller forms. The swarm dwarfed anything humanity or the Confederation had ever faced. On the bridge of the Defiant, silence fell as the crew stared at the impossible numbers. Then Commander Hayes straightened, her jaw tightened. "All hands," she said over the comm. "The real fight begins now." The swarm advanced, blotting out half the stars. And the Defiant, one small, battered ship of steel and stubbornness, turned to meet it head-on. The void swarm unfolded like a nightmare given wings. Rifts tore open in the fabric of space, vomiting forth more shapes of darkness. They moved as if guided by the same heartbeat, a tidal wave of living night. 300 massive entities, each the size of a small moon, pulsed with hunger. Smaller forms darted between them like parasites. Wherever they passed, stars dimmed as though afraid. On the bridge of the Defiant, silence clung for a moment too long. Screens bathed the crew in ghost light. Then Commander Lisa Hayes broke the stillness. Her voice was firm, iron wrapped in calm. "Helm, bring us forward, all power to engines." The crew stared at her. Bobby Carter, chief engineer, wiped sweat from his brow. "Forward, into that." "Yes," Hayes said, "into that." Pete Jackson, at Tactical, swore under his breath. "Commander, with respect, our ammo's low and our hull looks like it went around with a sledgehammer. Charging into them is suicide." "Pete," Hayes said quietly, "everything else is suicide too. We do nothing, Zelani Prime is gone, we retreat, Earth is next. Only way out is through." The words struck the crew like hammer blows, and then one by one they moved. "Aye, Commander," the helm officer said, voice steady. The Defiant turned, nose angled at the swarm. Its engines roared, a deep-throated growl in the vacuum of space. To the alien ship still limping near Zelani Prime, it looked like madness. One battered human vessel, moving straight at an armada that had devoured fleets of thousands. Rhea Ortiz clutched the skimmer's straps as the small craft climbed into orbit. The canopy showed the Defiant's silhouette against the night, a blade of gray steel cutting toward the impossible. She couldn't help it, she laughed, harsh and broken. Of course she's going in, she's human. Beside her, Thalen's skin rippled frantic blue-white patterns. "They cannot win." "No," Rhea said, "but they can make it hurt." The swarm reacted. Hundreds of void forms shifted as one, flowing like oil toward the Defiant. Beams of black energy lashed out, erasing light, erasing space itself. One strike tore through the starboard armor. A whole section of deck vanished, clean and silent as if it had never been built. Alarms screamed across the bridge. "We've lost Deck 10, Bobby shouted. "Structural supports are compromised." "Keep us moving," Hayes barked. Her eyes locked on the tactical display. "Pete, I want firing solutions on their command nodes. Don't waste a shot." "Working on it," Pete said. His hands flew across controls, sweat dripping. "But we'll have to get closer." "How close?" Hayes asked. Pete looked up, face pale. "Danger close, inside their formation." Hayes smiled grimly. "Then that's where we go." The Defiant plunged into the swarm. Railguns spat tungsten slugs, each one tearing through void bodies like bullets through paper. Nuclear missiles bloomed in furious blossoms of light, carving chunks out of the enemy tide. Every impact was primitive, brutal, and effective. The void forms screamed, not with sound but with distortion. The stars bent, the deck plates rattled, and the crew's teeth ached with the frequency. The swarm retaliated. Dark beams raked across the hull. Whole consoles went dark. Flames erupted in engineering. 2 crewmen were sucked into the void through a breach before emergency shutters slammed down. Still, the Defiant fought on. On the Zelani flagship, Ambassador Kethar watched, his blue skin alive with frantic patterns. Around him, dozens of alien captains stared in disbelief. "They are mad," whispered Prime Speaker Ethera. Her insect-like mandibles clicked, her eyes reflecting the chaos. "No one flies into death itself." "No one but them," Kethar murmured. His patterns flared with something the Zelani rarely showed: hope. "Karen," Hayes shouted, "talk to me." Science Officer Karen Bell hunched over her console, eyes wide. "Their control signals. There are multiple nodes this time, scattered across the formation. I count at least 5 major sources." "Then we break them," Hayes snapped. "Pete, load everything we've got." Pete's voice was grim. "Commander, we're down to 27 missiles, railgun ammo at 30%. "Then make every shot count," Hayes said. "Target the nearest node." "Aye," Pete locked coordinates, firing. 3 missiles streaked out, followed by a railgun salvo. They tore through a void giant, its body flickering like a dying flame. The command node pulsed once, then collapsed into nothing. The swarm convulsed. Dozens of smaller entities froze, their movements breaking pattern. "It works," Karen shouted. "One down." But before relief could settle, Bobby's voice cut across the chaos. "Commander, radiation levels climbing fast. We're inside their field, this close, it's lethal." "Then we don't stay," Hayes said. "Next target." The Defiant weaved through the swarm like a wolf among titans. More nodes fell, each one collapsing in nuclear fire. Each time the swarm faltered, but each time the retaliation grew fiercer. Another dark beam struck. The ship lurched violently, sparks showered the bridge. Pete was thrown from his seat, blood running down his temple. "Hull breach on deck 4, Bobby shouted. "We're losing pressure." "Seal it," Hayes barked. Her eyes never left the display. "We're not done yet." Karen's voice rose, tight with panic. "Commander, the last 2 nodes, they've clustered near the swarm center, deep inside." Hayes's lips thinned. "Then that's where we go." The crew stared at her, exhaustion in their eyes, terror on their faces, and yet not one of them moved to object. Rhea's voice echoed in Hayes's memory. Though she'd never met the engineer personally, she imagined the kind of words someone like her would say. Humans didn't retreat, not when someone needed them. "Helm," Hayes ordered. "Set course, ramming speed." The Defiant turned into the heart of the swarm, engines screaming, every plate on the hull groaning. From her skimmer, Rhea watched the human ship vanish into the Black Sea. The swarm folded over it like a tidal wave. For a heartbeat, it seemed swallowed, erased. Thalen's skin dimmed, despair washing through his patterns. "They are gone." Rhea shook her head, fierce. "No, they're human. That means they're just getting started." Inside the swarm center, the void bent around the Defiant. Radiation hammered the hull. Warning klaxons wailed. Crew coughed blood. Karen shouted over the noise. "Nodes ahead, firing solution locked." "Fire everything," Hayes ordered. Every remaining missile launched. Railguns poured their last rounds. Nuclear fire tore open the void, ripping the command nodes apart. For one blinding instant, the swarm collapsed inward. Its harmony shattered. Entities turned on each other, lashing out blindly. The void began to devour itself. But the Defiant was caught in the maelstrom. Gravity wells formed as dark matter collapsed. Hull plates buckled. Engines shrieked. The ship was being pulled into the swarm's dying heart. "Engines are failing," Bobby shouted. "We won't break free." Hayes looked around the bridge at her battered crew. Every face was bloodied, exhausted, but burning with the same fire. "If we're going down," she said, her voice steady, "we make it count." She slammed her hand on the comm. "All hands prepare for impact. The Defiant goes into the heart." The crew braced, the ship roared. The void swallowed them whole. The Defiant screamed as it fell into the void. Hull plates tore like paper. The bridge shuddered, consoles sparking. Crew strapped into harnesses were flung side to side as gravity wells twisted the ship in impossible directions. Radiation surged. The air stank of ozone and burnt circuitry. Hayes's vision blurred, but she gripped the command rail until her knuckles went white. "Engines are burning out," Bobby Carter shouted, his voice raw. "We're not climbing out of this one." "Then we ride it down their throat," Hayes barked. Her voice carried over the alarms, calm and absolute. The void swarmed around them. Fractured entities lashed at one another, tearing themselves apart. The black tide was collapsing inward, dragging everything, including the Defiant, into its dying heart. Karen Bell slammed her bleeding hand against her console. "Commander, the core nodes are destabilizing if we push just a little further." "Say it," Hayes snapped. "They'll collapse into themselves. A chain reaction, the whole swarm could eat itself." Hayes's eyes narrowed. "Could." Karen met her gaze, blood running down her temple. "Will, but we won't survive it." Silence fell across the bridge. Even amid alarms, explosions, and the groaning hull, those words cut clean. For a heartbeat, Hayes saw her crew as more than soldiers, saw them as people. Pete Jackson, bleeding but still gripping his weapon's console. Bobby Carter, hands flying over dead engines, refusing to give up. Karen, eyes bright with terror and certainty. The helm officer, steady hands guiding them into hell. 200 souls who had followed her here. 200 who deserved to live. "Not acceptable," Hayes said quietly. Her hand dropped to the comm switch. "Engineering Bobby, talk to me." "Engines are fried, Commander," he shouted. "But the reactors are still holding, barely." Hayes's mind raced. An idea insane but human sparked. Then we burn them. The crew turned to her, disbelief etched on every face. You mean self-destruct? Pete asked, voice hoarse. No, Hayes said, eyes blazing. Not self-destruct. Detonation. We overload the fusion cores and turn this ship into the biggest kinetic slug the galaxy's ever seen. If we time it right, we'll slam into their collapsing nexus and shove it past critical. That'll kill us, Bobby said. Yes, Hayes said, but it'll save them. She jabbed a finger toward the planet below, toward Zelani Prime, where billions of lives flickered. And that's our job. Silence heavy final. Then Pete Jackson laughed once, sharp and broken. Hell of a way to go. Karen nodded, better than waiting to be erased. Bobby slammed a fist onto his console. Fine, let's burn this ship down. The crew moved, no hesitation now. Every hand, every scar, every broken bone bent to one purpose, making the Defiant into a weapon. In orbit, alien ships drifted in ragged formation, powerless to act. On the Zelani flagship, Ambassador Kethar leaned against a crystalline railing, his skin flashing grief. They cannot escape, whispered Prime Speaker Ithara. No, Kethar murmured, but perhaps they can do what we could not. On her skimmer, Rhea Ortiz held her breath. The Defiant was a tiny spark swallowed by the swarm. She couldn't see details, couldn't hear comms, but she knew. Every scar on her hands told her what humans did when cornered. They're going to light the fuse, she whispered. Thalen's skin flashed pale. Fuse. Watch, Rhea said. Inside the void, the Defiant's bridge shook as Bobby forced the reactors into overdrive. Warnings screamed across every system. Temperatures spiked. Reactors at 140%, he shouted. Core breach in 60 seconds. Helm, Hayes barked. Aim us at the Nexus, straight through. Aye. The ship bucked metal, screaming. The void roared around them, black beams tearing at the hull. But still the Defiant moved. Missiles are gone, railguns are dry, Pete said. We're down to teeth and guts. That's all we ever needed, Hayes said. The countdown ticked down 40 seconds, 30, 20. At 10 seconds, Hayes keyed the comm. Her voice carried through the ship, steady as iron. All hands, you've done enough. You've done more than anyone could ask. If you believe in anything, gods, ghosts, or just each other, hold it now. Because this is what it means to be human. We fight until the end, and we never let the people we protect fall. Faces hardened across the ship. Tears fell, prayers whispered, jaws clenched. 5, 4, 3. Goodbye, Hayes whispered. 2, 1. The Defiant detonated. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then light. A star bloomed inside the swarm, brighter than a sun. Nuclear fire consumed the Defiant, but it didn't die in vain. The force of the explosion slammed into the collapsing nexus, shoving it past critical. The swarm screamed as its control web shattered. Entities turned on each other, their harmony collapsing into chaos. Dark giants ripped themselves apart. Smaller forms unraveled. The whole mass folded inward, consumed by its own hunger. The night lit with impossible colors as the void ate itself alive. And then silence. The swarm was gone. Only debris drifted in orbit. Rhea's skimmer jolted as shockwaves buffeted it. She clung to the canopy, tears stinging her eyes. They did it, she whispered, her throat ached. They actually did it. Thalen's skin glowed with stunned light. But where are they? Rhea's voice cracked. They're gone. Silence pressed between them, a silence filled with grief, pride, and something deeper. The Defiant was no more, but Zelani Prime still shone beneath the clouds. Billions lived because 200 humans had refused to back down. On the Zelani flagship, Ambassador Kethar spoke into the stunned quiet of his people. Remember this day, he said, his skin flashing solemn patterns. The day a world of death sent warriors who burned themselves to give us life. But deep in the wreckage, in the dark between dying fires, something moved. A single emergency pod, flung free in the final second, tumbled through debris. Its hull was scorched, its beacon weak. Inside, bloodied survivors clung to life. Lisa Hayes's eyes opened in the dim red glow. She coughed, tasted iron, and whispered. Still here. The escape pod drifted through the broken bones of a battlefield. Wreckage of void entities turned in silence, curling in on themselves like ash in water. Fragments of alien ships glimmered dimly, their elegant curves fractured. The debris of the Defiant, steel plates, torn bulkheads, blackened missile tubes, spun among them. Inside the pod, the air stank of smoke and blood. Emergency lights flickered red. Commander Lisa Hayes stirred, every muscle screaming. Her head pounded, her ribs felt cracked, but her eyes opened. She saw her crew, what remained of them. Pete Jackson slumped at his console, one eye swollen shut but alive. Bobby Carter coughed through blood on his lips, still clutching a burnt datapad as if he could fix something in death itself. Corinne Bell lay strapped in, her hands trembling, whispering numbers under her breath, counting stars, counting breaths, proving she was alive. 7 of them out of 200. 7. Hayes swallowed the grief down. Her voice came out hoarse but steady. Status. Pete forced a grin through cracked teeth. Alive, which seems like an error. Corinne coughed. Pod integrity 73%. Life support minimal, no long-range propulsion. Bobby rasped a laugh. So we're a rock in space. Not a rock, Hayes said, her eyes hardened. A signal. She dragged herself to the console, fingers raw, and keyed the beacon. A weak pulse flickered into the void. On the Zelani flagship, Ambassador Keithar leaned forward as the faint signal danced across their board. Survivors, he breathed, his skin lit with joy and sorrow mingled. By the stars, some endure. Prime Speaker Ithara tilted her insectal head, mandibles clicking. They cannot be many. Enough, Keithar said, his patterns flared with conviction. Enough to remind us what we have seen. He turned to his crew. Prepare recovery ships, bring them home. Hours later, the pod's viewport filled with crystal light as Zelani rescue craft enclosed it. Smooth arcs of energy gripped the pod and drew it into a bay of glass and song. The door hissed open. Cool air flooded in, scented with floral tones. Zelani medics, their skins glowing in patterns of urgency and comfort, rushed forward. Lisa Hayes staggered as hands caught her. Alien voices sang to scanners that passed over her body. Wounds closed under beams of harmonic light. Broken bones mended with crystalline splints that hummed softly. You are safe, one Zelani healer said. Be still, let us mend. Hayes shook her head weakly. Crew first. The medic blinked, then sang sharp notes of command. More healers surrounded Bobby, Pete, Corinne, and the others. Rhea Ortiz pushed through the crowd then, grease still on her hands, Thalen at her side. She froze when she saw Hayes. You're real, Rhea whispered, her voice broke. I thought. Hayes's lips twitched in the faintest smile. Reports of my death, she coughed hard, nearly collapsing, but Rhea caught her. Stupid, Rhea muttered, half laughing, half crying. Stupid, glorious humans. Days passed. The surviving crew of the Defiant lay in crystalline beds, healed by Zelani technology. Burns faded, bones fused, radiation cleansed from their blood. But scars, those would remain. Ambassador Keithar visited daily. His skin flashed gratitude like a sunrise. You have saved not only my people, he told Hayes. You have saved belief. For centuries we thought peace eternal, fragile, and sufficient. Then the swarm came and we discovered we had forgotten how to fight. You reminded us. Hayes, pale but sitting upright, met his gaze. We didn't remind you. We showed you. Peace is good, but peace doesn't survive unless someone's willing to stand when death comes. Keithar inclined his head, solemn. Then perhaps your people must stand with us always. In the great council chamber, the surviving alien leaders gathered. 17 species, each showing patterns of awe, grief, and newfound respect. Keithar stepped forward. We cannot face the galaxy alone. The void swarm is defeated, but other threats will rise. We need protectors. Prime Speaker Ithara's mandibles clicked. You propose alliance with humans. Keithar's patterns flared. Not alliance, membership, guardianship, let them become part of us. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some species glowed agreement, others flared doubt. They are violent, said one Athathuran, its energy form dimming uneasily. They solved with fire what we could not solve with light. Yes, Keithar said, that is exactly why we need them. The chamber fell into silence. On a balcony overlooking Zelani Prime's oceans, Rhea stood with Hayes, both wrapped in borrowed robes that hummed faintly. Below, children played among crystal gardens, their laughter echoing. They'll never understand, Rhea said softly. What it cost you, what it cost the crew. Hayes's jaw clenched. They don't have to, as long as they live, that's enough. Thalen stepped forward, his skin glowing with hope. Not just live, they want to invite humanity to join, to stand as guardians. Rhea blinked. Guardians, us, you've seen us fight, we break more than we save. Thalen's tones were gentle. And yet we are alive because you broke. Sometimes breaking the dark is enough. Hayes looked at the ocean, endless and calm. Guardians, the word felt heavy, but right. She turned back, eyes burning. If we do this, if humanity steps into this galaxy, we do it our way. No surrender, no silence, we fight when it matters. Thalen's skin flared bright. Then perhaps the galaxy is safer than it has ever been. But in the dark, beyond Zelani space, rifts stirred. Fragments of the swarm still twitched, coalescing in silence. A shadow pulsed, feeding on ruins. The war was not over. Not yet. The skies above Zelani Prime had never been clearer. For the first time in weeks, no shadows gnawed at the clouds, no towers crumbled, no alarms sang despair. Instead, the crystal cities glowed, rebuilt with hurried harmony. Lights danced across spires like fireflies in celebration. Yet beneath the beauty lingered silence, grief for the billions lost, awe for the 200 humans who had burned themselves into legend. In the Grand Council chamber, 17 alien delegations gathered again. The room's walls shimmered with refracted light, 1,000 hues shifting like water. At the center, Ambassador Kethar stood tall, skin bright with determination. His voice rang out, musical but edged with steel. The void's swarm is broken, but the void is never empty. Other storms will come. Alone we cannot stand, together we will. Prime Speaker Ithara clattered her mandibles, and the humans. Kethar turned, gesturing toward the chamber doors. They opened. Commander Lisa Hayes walked in. Her uniform was scorched-patched, the shoulders heavy with scars she would never shed. Behind her came Pete Jackson, limping but upright. Bobby Carter, his arm wrapped in a crystalline brace. Karen Bell, pale but steady, and Rhea Ortiz, grease still under her nails. The chamber hushed. Alien eyes of every shape and color turned toward them. Hayes's voice was low, but it carried. You called us, you asked for help, we came, we fought. And we bled. That's who we are. Humanity doesn't run from storms, we walk into them, not because we want war, but because somebody has to stand between death and the people who can't fight it. She let her gaze sweep the chamber. You want us as guardians? Then understand what that means. We won't hide when danger comes. We won't wait for permission. If we see someone needs help, we answer. That's our promise. That's our curse. Take it or leave it. Silence held. Then Kethar's skin flared in brilliant gold. I vote yes. One by one, the delegations spoke. The Thrix clicked their assent. The Athatharans pulsed bright. Even the cautious stonemen rumbled their agreement. Not all glowed joy, but none said no. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in 3 millennia, the Confederation welcomed a new member, humanity. Later, on the balcony of the council spire, Hayes stood with Rhea and Thalen. Below, children of half a dozen species played in the gardens, their voices a chorus of tones and laughter. Guardians, Rhea said, shaking her head. Never thought I'd see the day. Hayes's jaw tightened. We didn't ask for the job. No, Thalen said softly. His skin glowed, warm. But you're the only ones who can bear it. Hayes looked at the horizon. We'll bear it, but we'll do it our way. Weeks passed. Human ships, crude but fierce, arrived in Zelani space. Crews disembarked, walking among aliens with equal parts curiosity and caution. Children of Earth played with crystal toys. Alien engineers studied Terran railguns with a mix of horror and fascination. The Terran Defense Corps was born, a joint fleet human grit bound with alien technology. And for the first time in history, the Confederation felt safe. But safety never lasts. On the edge of explored space, beyond burnt systems and fractured gates, a fragment of the swarm pulsed. Smaller, weaker, but alive, feeding. It whispered into the dark, a signal no one yet heard. Not dead, not gone, only waiting. On Zelani Prime, Admiral Jake Morrison arrived from Earth. He joined Hayes on the spire balcony, both watching the alien sun sink low. Think we did the right thing? He asked quietly. Hayes didn't answer at first. She watched the children below, a Terran girl tossing a crystal ball to a Zelani boy whose skin rippled with laughter. She saw Karen Bell sitting nearby, teaching numbers in both languages. She saw Rhea Ortiz bent over a console, showing Zelani engineers how to make ugly human steel sing with their harmonics. Finally, she spoke. Look at them, human kids who'll grow up without war scars. Alien kids who'll grow up knowing someone will fight for them. That's enough for me. Morrison nodded slowly, and when the next storm comes, Hayes's lips curved into a thin, fierce smile. Then the galaxy will see what happens when you call Deathworlders for help. Far out in the black, the swarm stirred again, but now the galaxy was no longer defenseless. It had guardians. It had humanity. And humanity was ready.